Thank you very much. Is this volume okay? Can people hear me? Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you also for inviting me to speak to you today. This event is called Sound Copyright, Which Way for the EU? And I believe that's a very apt title, because I feel that the EU and the Parliament in particular is at a crossroads with this directive, the Term Extension Directive. And I hope that through the course of this morning, we will find the right way to go. On one side, we have a story about the poor performer, the performer who, it comes to the end of his life and his copyright expires, he can no longer fund himself, he is in penury. We know this story. The European Commission puts forward a piece of legislation to help him, and it's one of a number of legislative initiatives being crafted by the Commission around copyright in the digital age. That's one side. On the other side, we have mounting unrest among ordinary citizens about this piece of legislation. I wonder if those in this room would like to indicate to me whether they have seen the video produced by the Open Rights Group, how copyright term extension really works. Perhaps hands are only put up for voting in this institution, but if you see it, please raise your hand. You are one of 20,000 people who have viewed that video, and several people have translated it voluntarily into their native languages so that they could spread the word about concerns over this directive further. 15,000 European citizens have signed our petition asking MEPs to reject this directive, and I'm reliably informed that telephones here in Brussels have been buzzing with constituents asking their representatives to attend this event and to vote against the extension of copyright terms when it comes to plenary later this year.
Can you give the web of that video?
I can. Well, if you go to soundcopyright.eu, you will find a link to it there. You'll be able to watch it from there. And I think the popularity of this event only goes to show how contentious this directive is. The question we're here to answer today is, how should MEPs react? Which signpost should they follow? And which way should they go? Well, let's start with the fairy story. It centres on a poor performer who, having played guitar on a track in the 1960s, and having collected royalties on that track for nearly 50 years, is about to see those royalties cease and his copyright expire. This performer will, as a consequence, we're told, become even poorer than he already is. He will lose his main source of income, we are told, at the very time in his life, we are told, that he needs it most. As you will agree, it is a simple story, and it looks simple enough for MEPs to give it a happy ending. But, like many simple stories, it leaves a lot of open questions. What has this poor performer been doing for the last 50 years? Has he remained a performer? In which case, won't the royalties from his recent songs continue to deliver him an income? Jimmy Page was considered young when he did his first session work for Decca Records in the early 60s. When his first performer copyright expires, he'll already be nearly 70. Is our fairy tale performer, unlike Jimmy Page, a poor performer because nobody bought his records at the time? In which case, why would giving him another 45 years for no one to buy his records make him any richer? Or has he, like our former Prime Minister Tony Blair, given up his dreams of rock stardom for another career? And whether he was successful or not, and whether he remained a performer or whether he chose a different path, has he, like the rest of us, not put a proportion of his income aside during his working life in order that he might be able to provide for himself in his old age? Like Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella, Rapunzel, and all the other famous fairy tales of Europe, this story of the poor performer doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. So why are MEPs being told it? Ladies and gentlemen, I put it to you that the reason you are being told fairy tales is because if you were being told the real story, you would reject the term extension without question. As you will hear from the various speakers that are addressing this group this morning, all the evidence shows that the term extension directive will do very little, almost nothing, to help poor performers, and everything to line the pockets of the world's 4 major record labels. I often wonder if we should call them the Brothers Grimm, since they are the ones that have been telling you these fairy stories. The average European performer will make as little as 50 euro cents a year in additional income from sales associated with the term extension. And if the Session Musician Fund in the Commission proposal does not get swallowed up by the administrative costs of the labels and collection societies who administer it, because let's face it, tracking down violinists who worked for you 50 years ago will be a pretty time-consuming and expensive experience. That figure may rise to as much as 26 euros per year. But I'm sure you'll agree with me, that is no pension. Now that's just sales revenue. What about revenues artists receive from broadcasters, from levies on devices, or from licenses paid by hairdressers, public gyms, or restaurants? In fact, as the Commission has been forced to admit after the Open Rights Group pointed it out to them, these revenue streams are likely to decrease for living artists if the term extension directive goes ahead. Why? Because the income that would otherwise be going to young artists at the beginning of their careers will be going to the estates of dead performers. So who really benefits?